colleagues, good evening. We are ready to start our discussion. Please take your seats. Before starting this action, I would like to introduce the issue we're going to discuss. We have some organizational issues, and Igor is going to give us the format, how we're going to work together, and then I'm going to tell you how we're going to talk to moderators. Colleagues, good afternoon. Thank you for attending this session. I do understand that you have spent the whole days at the round tables. It will be very difficult to comprehend all the information in the evening time. The topic we're going to discuss has been in place for many years. The progress, not at the pace we would like to see, but therefore, like all the speakers, to be very specific on the questions, to be ready to answer them appropriately. Have a short presentation right now. We had a special award. I'd like to give in the special award for the gastronomic tourism promotion to co-founder of Gastronomic Tourism Festival organization. So, dear colleagues, we are ready to start. Our section is called The Trends in the Russian Hospitality Business, Challenges, Expectations and Reality. The topic we're going to elaborate on today is going to be about the definition of hospitality, the forms of this notion, the usage of this definition in the business society and by the experts. As of today, there are many people who use this notion. Many people have dedicated their lives to doing business in this area. Someone's call it the industry of hospitality. Others use the sphere of hospitality. Today we're going to find out how to use this notion appropriately, how it influences the business itself, or the business lives as it does. So today we have the expert panel, very wide, professional. It's very difficult to moderate such a panel when you see the people who know everything about this sector, as they can share this information. So, dear colleagues, we have the following format. First, we're going to give the framework, and then we're going to try to give short timing for presentations, and then we'll try to do our best to talk with the audience and to speak on the most outstanding issues. So, dear experts, when the time is up, he's going to interfere and tell you about this. The first presentation and the first to Mriya who is managing partner of Open Mind Business Bureau, Vice President, Sochi 2014 Olympic and Paralympic Organizing Committee. So please take the floor. You might take the mic. Today we have a very interesting event. So we had trouble in attending this event. So those who attended the first Gaidar forum was a little bit small. Today we have an anniversary, 10 years anniversary of the forum. It's very important that we have a very significant topic we're going to discuss within these global events. Amid those challenges and difficulties we face on a daily basis. If you allow, outside my presentation with the influence and impact of global events on the development of hospitality, I would start with university games, with the Olympic Games, and with the World Cup. These global events, they change the image of the hospitality industry. These events created tangible and non-tangible heritage of our country, which we are going to use very successfully in the development of the economy, in the tourist industry, which is at high stake right now. The previous section, which I attended and talked on the sport issue, on how the sport has impact on the economy, on the politics, etc. The first very important event, even though being the student Olympic Games in the modern Russia, was the 26th World Student Olympic Games. For the organizers of the Olympic Games, that was like the test platform, as Kazan changed itself, became a very big modern city with a very powerful infrastructure in place in terms of transportation, Medicare. Everything was transformed to this end. And many technologies which were applied during the Olympic Games were tested during these university games. And all the mistakes made, all the flaws afforded were taken into account. 14 hospitals were built. And then during the World Cup, 400 hotels. It means that the city is developing very significantly. And Tatarstan region, in terms of the heritage, is a flagship region which is actively participating in the business, economic, sport life of the country. All the sports facilities were designed as multifunctional sites, which are used as not only sports but cultural, business, exhibition platforms. Therefore, we need to mention that this reasonable approach to the heritage played a very pivotal, important role further on. So the concept of the World Cup 2018 heritage was built on the same terms. There are always client groups attending all the events, and for us, for the hospital industry, they are all important. The guests, the participants are very important. The global audience is also very significant, paying very huge attention to this event. Kazan became very popular, Sochi became very popular, and now we have 11 cities which are well known around the world. After the University Games, there were mega events, and Tatarstan region is actively participating in applications for all the events. They still host the Confederation Cup, host 4 matches and 6 World Cup matches. It's always very interesting to note whether the economic impact was in place and what was the dimension. We need to say that PricewaterhouseCoopers study, this is the estimate, 6.2 billion, the direct economic impact resulted from the events. There is indirect economic effect, which is quite widespread, influencing the whole regional economy. The region, the country, the city. The areas which undergo these economic effect are miscellaneous, from rental to the retail sector. In 2013, these are the figures. This is a huge effect, an impetus provided for Tatarstan, which made them believe that you need to take part in all different types of events. 2.8 billion of rubles were received by the companies in professional service areas, which provided their services during the university games. New jobs were created. 2 billion of rubles were spent on the catering services. Both participants and fans, 9,000 residents attending the stadium every day. Everybody felt the impact of university games on themselves, as all the industries and areas took very active part in organizing and hosting the event after the university games. A year later, the mega event of the Winter Olympic Games in Sochi. It was clear that we had the experience of 1980 and the concept of 2014 Sochi of 2014 was absolutely different conditions, a different city. It was very difficult. Nobody believed that a small city in Sochi, which was very difficult in terms of logistics and transportation, the infrastructure was not ready at all. Nobody believed that it was possible to provide such infrastructure changes. In terms of the economics, the effect was not possible at instance. About 15 to 20 years is the timing for these long-term effects. The major investors of the Olympic Games are quite well known. These are both state-owned companies. Those were the budget allocations, extra budget allocations, private investment. According to different estimates, that's about 51 billion US dollars. The most expensive Olympic Games as of today. Talking about the heritage, this is the very stable and positive change in the whole social, environmental areas which had impact on this region. It turned into region with very high level of activity. You know that not only sport events take place in this region, business life is very active in the city as well. Talking about non-tangible heritage, that is something which is very difficult to describe and to measure. But in fact, to measure non-tangible heritage is almost impossible. This is not about the knowledge and expertise gained. When we got the right to hold the World Cup 2018, and then there was too much speculation on how it was supposed to be taken from us. Everybody followed the headlines. There was very high assessment of this stuff and the preparation of the country for such an event, and this very high assessment and high level of mobilization in our country, which understood how to host global events compared with the preferred World Cup, which caused much criticism from the organizers. We had a very good expertise, and we were very good at hosting such an event. Remember those years when the Olympic Games were held, everybody seeked the national idea. Everybody lacked the project, the uniting project, and the Olympic Games themselves, the high results, the high assessment of best ever Winter Olympic Games by the organizing committee demonstrates that we managed to create non-tangible heritage at the level of the country, at the level of the region, at the level of the city. Talking about the level of the city, the integration of Russia accelerated into the global sport movement. You know that Krasnoyarsk is going to be the place for University Winter Games, the Formula 1, Confederation Cup, and other cups and events we're going to host. This is the impact of the global events on the state itself. As for the Krasnoyarsk region, this is not a very simple region. Saying that the Olympic Games themselves gave the impetus to promote the business activity, to encourage investment, to create new jobs. And the infrastructure which was created as a result of the Olympic Games. This is a very significant platform and foundation to revive the economy of the region. I don't think there is any single person who has never attended Sochi and does not attend Sochi on a regular basis, because it's a good place for different events, different exhibitions, different business events. And the city, which is a resort, which turned from a small city into a big resort, a huge number of hotels in different three clusters, which are actively attended by the tourists. The Russian standard in the International Olympic Organization, they believe that the Russian standard is a high level, best ever, which was not achieved, for example, in Korea, as our level was very high. The World Cup. We're always interested in figures. Probably you've heard Dmitry Anatolyevich presentation that this is one pension fund money. This is not the biggest investment, but the most effective one. Compared with the South Africa and Brazil, our budget is a little bit higher. But Qatar, which is going to host the next World Cup in 7 cities, 8 stadiums, is going to spend about 200 billion organizing this event. Of course, the comparison speaks itself. The benchmark on the revenues of FIFA compared with other countries are also high. Unfortunately, we don't have all the full information. This is the information from the public sources. More than 6 billion is well known. Unfortunately, I'm almost out of my time. I need to speak fast. We know what is sold, what is bought, how our industry of hospitality is burdened. As for the countries, these are all the tourists. This is higher than any other types of sports. We have hosted the most active fans who wanted to spend good time and to spend a lot of money, which was done actually. I said that 3.6 billion people, the global audience, who watched the World Cup on TV. Our industry is growing. The attendance rate of hotels, the average check in the restaurants, delivery times, so on and so forth. So the basket of the services is always almost the same. Those are services you look at. All the companies working in these areas are always engaged in organizing the events. The main client groups are the same, attending our global events. All the records were broken. This is the FIFA assessment, the best ever. World Cup, and great success that we made it to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. The Qatar delegation, which we had our meeting with very often. They were very active. They were very careful at looking into our expertise and our experience. They had interviews, looked at our experience. So they are preparing quite appropriately, but they're quite cautious about these standards, high standards in our country, to follow them further on. There is the concept of the heritage on the World Cup, on the facilities, infrastructure facilities. In 11 cities by 2023. Everybody should make it break even. And the principle of using the heritage of the university games, of the Olympic Games, and we should avoid the white elephants when the infrastructure is created. And after the event, it is not used at all. What is in the concept? It includes 12 stadiums and 95 training fields.
A very important legislative initiative that left a really deep mark on our industry. That is fan ID, first of all, and that is 5 million tourists that came in winter now, and they occupied all our hotels in Moscow at least by 90%. I have very little time left, so let me switch here. Who will the stadia be given to? We have 3 concepts. They can be given to regional authorities, either fully or partly, or they can stay within the federal authorities. And now the funding has been earmarked for preparing these facilities and venues. Regional leaders now have meetings with a lot of agencies, and there are a lot of professional fora to discuss the concept, to discuss how the hospitality industry and operators would act. And the record in terms of FIFA revenues that has exceeded by 8% is important. And I would like to draw your attention to Chinese companies that have tapped the market, and we have had meetings with a lot of them, and many of them have not simply been interested in taking part in the World Cup, but also in breaking the barrier to the Russian market. So that was critical for them, and therefore participation in the FIFA World Cup was for them as a preliminary act for further participation in the Russian Federation market. But from prize money and others, and our team received 16 million for its status, and I'm pleased to note that. There are also targeted payments that FIFA makes, and there are additional costs for construction and adaptation. Regrettably, that is only half of my presentation, but I hope that I will have a chance to take your questions in further discussion. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chariva. And please think about the following. As for global events that a country can arrange, on the one hand, we have a huge heritage or legacy, but on the other hand, does a global event influence new businesses, their creation, and whether they can survive afterwards, and the burden that the regions feel after these global events? Can they maintain it afterwards? So, Vyacheslav, now I would like to address you. Vyacheslav Fedorishev, first deputy governor of Tula region. And we went to Tula in December when you were actively preparing to New Year events, when you were getting the city ready for the festival. And that was a really right movement that attracted a lot of people. And Tula is one of the entities that has started tapping digital economy, and tourism has started entering digital economy as well. So do you think that the legacy of global events has had an impact on the development of tourism, and how did you support it further on? How did it reflect on people, on you, on business? Are there any issues, and are there any recommendations for other regions? Thank you very much. Good evening to all of you. And answering your question, we are in a situation where none of the global events has touched us, because the World Cup was close to us, as Tula is a 2-hour drive away from Moscow, but we were not engaged in it. And we started thinking what to do to develop tourism, because I believe no one will argue that tourism in Russia is at around 10% developed of the whole prospects. And our domestic tourism is underdeveloped, so we need to do something to engage our Central, Eastern and other regions into this motion. And here we get into a classical trap, because on the one hand, you do not have good infrastructure, as no one is coming to you. And no one is coming to you as you do not have good infrastructure. So we started thinking what to do, and we came up with a project, started rethinking the project of New Year capital of Russia. That is a project of Ministry of Culture of the Russian Federation that was implemented in Kazan, Vladimir, Vologda before us. And Tula has never been New Year capital of Russia, like Tambov and Vologda. So that is just a beautiful status. that you receive, and then you have to act the way you can. So we started to fulfill this potential. And apart from the New Year events that you have mentioned, we started to decorate the city, downtown, the embankments, the key hotels, and we also started to work with business. Because the usual issue that you face when you get to the hotels in some regions of Russia is that there is a very low level of service. That is to say, nothing about when you bring foreigners. So I will now tell you what we have done. In figures, from the 7th of December to the 7th of January, Christmas, we started to arrange not less than 10 different events, regional, municipal, and not only in Tula, but also in several municipalities. And therefore, we have had over 2,000 events. We have received over 100,000 tourists. And that is really important. And within digital economy, with our campaigns, we are trying to understand how to count that correctly by SIM cards or tourist cards. And in Tula, we tried to calculate that, and that was 100,000, and in last year it was 15,000 only. This slide shows you particular features of the project. So that is a snowflake mapping show that can be done in any other location, and that will not cost you much, just some administrative effort. As for other events, that is again something that you can do. And if you consolidate it in one location, then you give a large tourist attraction. As for the results that we wanted to attain, we wanted to have more and more people into museums, and that gave the museums much more revenue. And that would influence their development programs now. We have come up with some tourist features. We agreed with the taxi companies, and they retrained their taxi drivers into tour guides. So if the taxi runs for over 5 minutes or 10 minutes, they start telling some stories, some kind of tour to the passengers. And we came up with an interesting event with the Post of Russia, allowing people to send a New Year postcard. And we have engaged volunteers, both young people and silver volunteers. Around 100 people were simultaneously outside, just helping tourists. We received a lot of people, and we analyzed through questionnaires who we received. First of all, that was families that came by their own cars, 25, 35 years old, and they stayed for 2-3 days. So that is our target audience. And we came up with a fan ID that we took from the World Cup concept, and we engaged over 140 businesses, hotels, restaurants, museums, private museums that gave discounts and different presents, and increased the quality of the service. And we had worked with them for 4 months. We had run high-quality and certified workshops with each of them, with restaurateurs, with hoteliers, with their staff, training them how to work with the guests correctly. We retrained them to work in English. Regrettably, not everyone succeeded, not everyone speaks English, but still, in the key venues, there should be at least one person that can accompany a foreigner. And likewise, we worked with catering facilities so that they can have navigation in English, menus in English, and so on. We have private tourist information centers. We have municipal tourist information centers, and with them we also worked on the quality of work and politeness and English language. Then we analyzed what guests and tourists wrote in social media, and there were a lot of feedback, and the main feedback was positive. And we also looked at the feedback at booking.com, and there was an interesting story there, because there people write what they truly think, and they have some kind of study or a movement on 10 most visited cities, and Tula turned out one of them. And we looked at the feedback there, and some people wrote about bad breakfasts, about pillows in hotels, and so on and so forth. And we discussed it at our meetings, and some colleagues started saying, why do they work so badly and poorly in hotels and restaurants? But we explained to them that it is not their bad work, but it is just their lack of experience on the one hand, and large experience of tourists on the other hand. And afterwards we will arrange a follow-up workshop. So as for the recommendations for the regions, again, that is all accumulated practice, and we have a hotline for consulting tourists. And the most important thing is to arrange more and more local events that would use targeted advertising through social media. And by the way, billboards in Moscow, of which we had 25 in Moscow only, worked very well, because that attracted logistics. And afterwards we need to analyze clearly what we had to improve. Thank you very much, Vyacheslav. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say welcome to Tula. Please visit us. So what you are saying now is really important, and we discuss that a lot. What is and what are parts of hospitality, and are business and the government separate, acting here or not? And when some events take place for small companies, that is really something unachievable. But when you start working in the region, even the federal authorities cannot arrange anything without the business, because they will lack in the product. And then business also needs to get united into some professional institutions, into some communities. So if the global events leave their trace in regions and small cities, how is it reflected on small business and different chain businesses? And do standards, their standards, survive, or do they take on some standards from the federal level? So, Vadim Prasov, now I would like to give the floor to you. Vadim is managing partner of Alliance Hotel Management. Can I ask you a question? Within the control and surveillance activities, you have had checks, and was it the Ministry of Emergency staffers who checked it? No, they cannot check it, but how was it arranged? 2 years ago, we had a committee on tourism under the Ministry of Culture. There are 10 people working there, but this committee on tourism has arrangements with our 2 higher educational institutions, and they have volunteer pool. And within the agreement signed with the business that they become part of this loyalty program, our volunteers checked everything on the white book of Ministry of Emergency. Because, colleagues, if we have just a in order to check it, we receive inspectors from the Ministry of Emergency, and then just the restaurant can go bankrupt. Like in the Soviet Union, they said you have 2 weeks to remediate these errors. But in this case, restaurateurs were more interested. Well, I agree with that, and we would be happy to hear recommendations, but when you receive someone who checks something on just formal signs, like Mr. Medvedev has mentioned that, and if you do not eliminate that, you are closed. Well, that does not work in Tula like that. Well, Vyacheslav, thank you very much, and Igor, thank you very much as well. So, Vadim. Yes, I am a managing partner of Alliance Hotel Management and vice president of the Federation of Restaurateurs and Hoteliers, and as for how it influenced, yes, how do global events influence small cities, and are there enough resources in companies in the regions? And what about the trace of globalization? So if we started speaking about the World Cup legacy, I can give an example of the city of Saransk that received several recommendations for World Cup, like among others, 2 chain hotels, including Sheraton, and the usage of this legacy was obvious 2-3 years ago, but only this week a separate agency is put together that would unite sport and tourism, and that is a step forward. And the way this agency was called before, that was a nightmare. And after working on a large sport event, pretty good sport event, like Russia's championship on figure skating that took place there, very often the city under-receives some business and tourist flows. And while the hotel was being constructed there, I went on business trips there, and there was Rusline flying there daily, 1 flight for 50 people, and now 2 flights go there as 7 with the Mriya and Sukhoi Superjet in Airfloat. So you can see that the flows do grow. But what is lacking is the tourist product that would be clear and formed. And what is also lacking is the regional promotion for the both domestic and foreign tourist perception. And Saransk invoked a smile on the faces all the time during the preparation for the FIFA World Cup. Everybody was asking why had the city been chosen, and I was forced to find excuses, saying that the city was good and nice and so on, and just it so happened that they fought for it and won, and now it is important to maintain it. And Mr. Putin has prolonged fan ID action, and I do not think that it has given its effect. We can calculate it, give the official figures, but the main number of fans, for example, if in Peru people were saving money for 4 years just to go for FIFA World Cup, selling their cars and flats and so on and so forth. So it is obvious that it makes no sense to expect this guest again from Latin America.
But it would be quite logical to prolong the fan ID for 2019, for 2020. Then we would see the effect, which would be quite significant, which can be felt and measured. It's obvious that for most of the countries which attended as a guest to the World Cup, Russia during the winter period is kind of a challenge. This is not quite an easy solution to go to Russia when you see the weather forecast and you see minus 10 degrees by Celsius. So many people are afraid of such weather, and not everybody is ready for that. As for the benefits for this small city, it gains kind of concentrated brain explosion because people engaged in the hospitality sphere are not ready. And Moscow was not ready, actually, for such a volume, such a traffic, as you see at Nikolskaya Street. So there was a kind of bottleneck. Yes, the most sold projects were the contraceptives and the beer. I don't see the right order. Sberbank gave us different statistics on the drugstores. The drugstore was the last place, actually, in terms of the sales volumes. Maybe they were painkillers. I might be mistaken, actually. Nobody expected such a traffic, but we have been preparing for that for a long time. As strange it may seem, there was a bottleneck on the command of languages, not English. If there is no English-speaking country, it's good that you have good command of language, but your tips depend on how you may say hello in 4 other languages, in 6 languages, 8 languages. Those people attending World Cup from different cities, there was Iran-Portugal match, speak English to both of them. Just ridiculous. Iran is a very sophisticated category of guests, very specific one. So in fact, we saw different situation. We got the experience, and I can say that most of those who worked in the industry on the regional level for 2, 3, 4 years even decided to go to different regions. Maybe luckily for them, but for the local industry, this is unfortunate. They understood that, in fact, there is some room for the development, there is some room for the promotion. You can enter new markets. Although the roads lead you to Moscow, to St. Petersburg, many look at these 2 cities. I do believe that. This is a good push. You need to look at the mistakes. You need to look at the conclusions. You need to single out both benefits and disadvantages. So for you to work with this heritage, I can say that the former minister or the archive didn't gather the hoteliers to thank them for that. It was very surprising for me, but this is the fact. We haven't learned fully to thank the people for the good job. The same, there is a Ministry of Economic Development and this initiative to have so-called honored hotelier that you can get after a particular number of years working in the industry. Do you understand right that what Mriya Jarna has said? You're saying that the global events make the business standardize to achieve the levels. There are some practices developed which may give the opportunity to promote themselves, to become more competitive as well. It's very difficult to improve their best practice within 4 matches. This is like a hurricane. This is very fast, but after this push, after this hurricane, the only opportunity for them to stay on the market is to increase the quality, the level of services, and the revenue. So they are looking at the best practices. This is quite a reasonable approach of them. Igor Olegovich, may I ask the question? Just simple question. What is your own opinion? In general, there is a world practice. You remember what the stadium in Turin, what happened to this stadium? It was actually smashed. The 1 million city was not ready to manage this stadium after the event, but it was quite clear. Other than Moscow, Kazan, St. Petersburg, all other cities were destined for that. What is your opinion? By 2023, they need to make it break even. It doesn't matter what they do. When we're talking about 300 million for the maintenance, it's very difficult to imagine any other mentioned by you to make this break-even point. I know the design of the stadiums and how they different from many European stadiums, which have about 15,000 seats for the exhibition or for the banquets. So apart from the World Cup, utilization of the stadiums is quite limited. Of course, you can give this 2023, 2033 time limit. This situation is going to change. Igor, I would like to involve you in our discussion. Is there any international experience or understanding when the activity of hospitality sector is the driver of the area development after such global events or fora? Are there any forms of restaurants, of the hotels, which become globalized and to enter other markets? There are some different educational things. So from your perspective, what might be the driver? It's difficult to call you immediately any things like that. Vladimir has mentioned already, and we are discussing the following issue. For example, in Kaliningrad, I asked the governor, how do you expect to use this stadium? Do you understand that there was not a special system of maintenance connected with catering is the most painful issue. We have been dealing with it for our life. How can you use the heritage? And I've been working for a long time, almost 40 years in the sphere. I do still remember after the 80s, big open summer canteens which were used as the bars and warehouses quite effectively. If we're saying that we need to use these stadiums, Vladimir attended Canada and looked at their experience, everything connected with the stadium, and we went to Cincinnati and looked at their stadiums. NHL stadiums which are quite comparable with our stadiums. You need to have about 20 to 24 seats in NHL for your team to be participant of this league. We looked at the baseball, the American football, and these Democratic Party meetings in the pre-election campaigns and big events connected with the banquets and celebrations. It is used on a daily basis almost. And when you ask a question when there is money to cut loans, and being a taxpayer, I cannot enter the stadium to play football, for instance. It's not quite clear how to use this stadium, this nest in Beijing, which is used as the retail market, closed open market. So they don't understand how to use it as well. Yes, as of today, it has some success, but Tula region, everything went apart from Tula, everything passed Tula. Talking about the industry, there is a huge problem, and I wanted to discuss it with Vyacheslav. There is a tourism in place as a self-sufficient organism. But the restaurants is the responsibility of the Ministry of Industrial Development. But the restaurants is the scope of authority or the Ministry of Economic Development. But if you remember the inns with the beds, this is the most painful situation, as the catering in hotels is in lack. It is impossible to have meal in our hotels. I have attended many of them around our country. It is impossible to have any meal. So this divide causes the following thing. We need to talk about the tourism. The state can bring everybody together, so and say to them, we are now trying to make money, but not the political mottos. The tour should become the capital to have the good scoring for your political activity. So we would like to provide a better service, to render high-quality service. So this is the answer to the question, that you can build Hyatt standards hotels, Marriott standards Marriott, to add gold into the design, to have Shishkin pictures on the walls of every room, and you'll be classified as 5-star hotels. But talking about the level of services, is not going to give you even 3-star level. So how can you combine that? You can call yourself 5-star hotel, but so what? You ask for special tools, and they don't provide you with these tools because they have forgotten to buy these special bathroom tools. Every event has an impact on the business to think that something should be done, but then there is a pause time, and the most difficult thing is to work with the guests who didn't like. So what can you do for them to return? There are some people who do not attend the restaurant he attended 20 years ago. It is impossible to have meal, but you tell him that they have changed the chefs, the owners. I had a very unpleasant experience 20 years ago. I'm not going to go there again. So they think about the service level. They think about the quality. It's not about the restaurants. It's about the taxi man. We attended Armenia and talked to our colleagues. They have a high quality in Lvov as a union of restaurateurs. And the taxi men have very high rent. We gathered all the people and took them to the center of the city. This is a good example how it might work. We have both positive practices when you can expand and we see the potential. Those who don't see the standards or who work on the area, you do not want to follow the level. Is it kind of a threat, or might be regarded as a problem for the area if they do not move hand in hand? Or you have a different opinion? Just very brief. This is not a threat, this is a blessing when the market is doing cleansing itself from those who are not ready to work according to the standards. Talking about the heritage, and the example of Sochi, of the catering operators, local ones, of Sochi and Krasnodar region, there were 6 different concepts. I would like to mention that the transformation which happened within 4 or 5 years. We had a very big event in November, and we looked for the local operators. Everybody was engaged. Some were responsible for catering Formula 1, with big government events. They used to be very small local companies, which we had within this heritage concept to train, to develop, to give them particular scope of responsibility in terms of the catering and services. Now, these are very stable and big companies. And Vadim mentioned the discussion about the stadiums and utilization of the stadiums. First of all, if we talk about the sport, if there is no single team in a city, who is going to be watched? You go to an American state, there is basketball team, everyone has its own stadium, it's full 30 days a year. This is kind of the details how the stadium works. Somebody should be invited to that. You need to sell tickets. The first is baseball, then American football. The third, in terms of volume, is NBA in the south and in the north. 36 billion US dollars turnover. The stadium gives the turnover in the regular season from 2 to 6 million US dollars per one match, and when playoff, for example, Los Angeles against New York, so there is about 12-15 million per every match. Garden in Toronto, the basketball during daytime, hockey after afternoon, and the concert event in the evening. So the transformation from the ski area into the concert takes about 3-4 hours. We have, in our country we have 48 hours. So you should understand between the difference between the entertainment in the US. My yesterday talk on the sports nutrition, 22 billion US dollars, and sports nutrition in Russia, 21 million US dollars. Can you see the difference? Just 1,000 times. And this is true for the sports expenses. Vladimir Bakanov, Vice President, Federation of Restaurateurs and Hoteliers of Russia. So talking about the brands, all the questions should go to him. I have the following question. Today, Vladimir Savage, when he started his plenary session, said that every country starts to celebrate the anniversary of dollar, of euro. We have some things in Russia. So in hospitality area, in 2018, we shaped some data that there is time for heritage in business when the owners start to give the business to other generation. And in hospitality, this is an integral part when you need to work out institutionalization in terms of the relations between parents and children, between the owners and managers. When the name of the company starts to have impact on capitalization of the assets or capitalization of your own business. So how, from your perspective, is the impact of the global framework on the competition? Our country is moving to a new level when the regions start to compete against each other. So the form of branding and the institution of branding in the hospitality area, from your perspective, connected with the value of the business, and should these regions tackle the brand development? Let's start with the words which I like. There is a rule of juggling. If you have 1 hour to talk to another person, spend 50 minutes on agree on the terms. So within these 12 minutes, you have the chance to understand each other. Otherwise, you will talk in vain. Unfortunately, brand is used in a very unreasonable way. So today we have a big event and the auspices of the Council Federation. We are taking part in that. There is the amendment to the civil code in terms of the geographical names and regional products, but they are called the regional brands. So let's agree on the following: that for you to become the brand, the trademark should first be visual in the graphic image, should be registered in the special service, and then for many years, from my experience, up from 5 to 6 years, you need to promote it to turn into the brand. Can this brand be handed over to others? I'm just speculating in terms of the restaurants. The biggest brands are based on the franchise. Our brands are built on the chef or on the restaurateur name. These are two key persons. This is not the story for our country. This is around the world. Whether to hand it over to the next generations, whether it is connected with the energy of this project, the energy of the child, of the parent cannot go to the child. If you have already used technology, it may work. So the high-level restaurants cannot participate in that. This is about the authors. This is about the creativity. There might be some franchised catering services, from our perspective, on the way of development of original products.
And they're appearing in this country. There is a chance that territories might receive some sound concepts that might turn into venues that can be franchised. And what is a franchise? Like Americans, every 5 years create a new market of restaurant business. 5 years ago, they like Nikkei, and I had not known much about it before, like Peruvian cuisine, but they made it in 5 years because they understood that they could have franchises in this trend with thousands of restaurants. And as for us, we have very little experience connected with a particular restaurateur or restaurant. I believe that Rustics group has come up with 3 brands that can be handed down to next generation. Talking about the development in principle, today, regrettably, our main drawback is undercapitalization. I believe you all are sensing it. And unlike economically developed country, ideas are looking for money in our case. And in economically developed countries, it is vice versa. Money is looking for ideas to invest into them, to capitalize on them. So in the near future, I believe we need to combine 3 elements. First of all, investors have to finally understand that they can give loans under high interest rate only in commodities. And as for high-risk business, they can be only direct investment and loans that take into consideration the venture nature of it. And after a certain volume is reached, a restaurant can and should be franchised all around the territory. And I believe that the facility that is successful in a small town can be even more successful in large cities and in Moscow. And bearing in mind the development of fishery and regional products, we have a chance that this will turn up soon. Because so far, I am not sure about inheriting anything and handing down anything apart from 5, 6 names. And as for the terminology, Gastroteurs is a term that is wide used, and there is a person sitting next to me that has received a special letter of merit. But let us agree that gastrotourism is an easy thing and it can be defined easily. So tourism is gastronomic only and when the main motivating factor of the trip, or the most important factor of the trip, is enjoying exquisite cuisine. All the rest, like in Russian when we say that you have had some good, tasty, nice food, like today on my way here, a guy asked or told me, advertised calorie canteen. So calorie restaurants, calorie canteens, where you can eat tasty and enough, are not connected with gastrotours. Gastrotours are connected with exquisite dishes. And talking about gastronomic tourism, it has a massive advantage. We are all now seeking increasing tourist flows, and we believe that it is a good. And European countries like Bulgaria have faced a situation when they do not need more tourists. They need to increase the quality of tourist flows. Because talking with the mayor of Burgas, he says, Burgas is now perceived as a place with the cheapest alcohol. So that is something that you want to avoid, definitely. And when people visit our territory, or if we talk about domestic tourism, they need to have enough funds to invest, to promote and develop, not to hurt. And Tula is making good steps, and it has 2 pseudo products, that is Tula gingerbread and Tula pastila, that in the classical sense cannot be considered regional products because Tula gingerbread can be different, they vary, and most importantly there is some paste made from raisins, raisins that are used with the pits, and when you give a foreigner to taste it, they really react in a strange way. And pastilla that has to be made from apple is made from apple and a lot of other things. So most importantly, we also need to understand that a regional product can be created and the whole business can be built on that. 3 years ago, for example, the most exported product from Italy was Parmigiano Reggiano, the cheese, then Parma ham. And last year, you know, which product led the export from Italy? If you know, raise your hand. Aceto balsamico di Modena. So that is really great. Modena received tourist flows. Nobody had known anything about it before. So going back to regional products, when there are regional products characteristic for this territory that are developed to gastronomic perfection, and I will highlight that Tula, gingerbread, and pastilla has a long way to go to perfection, gastronomic perfection. And that is one thing. And second, on the basis of these products, you can arrange your own characteristic restaurants or eating out. It can be even street food, depending on the particular territory. Then it can turn into chains and into real business. If you wish, I can share a couple of ready models with you. Vladimir, do I understand it correctly that right work with the products in the regions can turn into global projects in hospitality that will move the region in the institutional model of interaction and competition at global international platform? Absolutely. For example, half France, half Germany, half Spain go to Toulouse to try cassoulet. And what is cassoulet? They are like sausages with beans. And that is great branding. The roots of the product are from there. We need to create these products. If I may, yes, Vyacheslav, I understand that you would like to comment, but I would like to forewarn you that myself and my neighbor on the right, we have been dealing with regional products since 1998. Since the first economic crisis. So 20 years have passed, and we know a lot on this project, more than everybody in this country. Vyacheslav, you're welcome. So first of all, I would like to tell you that gastronomic tourism will never be built around gingerbread or pastilla, because that is not cuisine. We're talking about regional cuisine, and pastilla and gingerbread are not cuisine. But I'm not talking about gastronomic tourism. There are businesses around it, but it will never turn into gastronomic tourism. And some interactive poll. Polenov Vasily Petrovich, who knows about him? Please raise your hands. So how many people know about Vasily Polenov? Well, not many. Please raise your hands. Around 15. Another question. Lakovor cuisine. Lakovor, what is it? That is local cuisine. That is, again, that is just a story that has been invented. So 15 kilometers around you are the products that you use in your cuisine. So who knows about it? Everybody? Well, not everybody. Just not everybody is using this word that you have used. Everybody is using local word. Let us call a spade, like learn to eat minced meat. But the first restaurant of local cuisine turned up in Tula region next to Palenova mansion. And more people know about this restaurant than those who know about Palenova mansion, regrettably. And more people go to the restaurants as well. I did not say that praniki or gingerbread or pastilla belong to gastro-tourism, but believe me, if we bring pastilla to perfection, it can turn into a dish that is like a cherry on the cake of a great gastro dinner. So that is not full dinner, naturally, but it is its completion. But we are talking about products, and the governor has done a lot getting Tula gingerbread to Aeroflot and so on and so forth. But that is not tasty. There are a lot of references to Boris Zharkov, so can I get him into the discussion? I can tell you that the majority of people will not tell gingerbread from Vyatka, Gorodetsk, Vyazim, or Tula. So far, there is no face to it. So you can say forever that you can attract tourists using that. So Boris Zarkov is restaurateur and owner of White Rabbit family that is in top 50 restaurants of the world. Boris, so we are saying that everything goes like this. Businesses exist and money should seek ideas, and Sobyanin has once voiced at a forum that Moscow is a city that does not compete with the cities of Russia, but it competes with the cities of the world, and that is totally different rules, formula, and standards. And we would like to ask you, how is the business done here? How hard it is to come up with these ideas, and how can you maintain this standard? How can you bring it to the regions? And do you need to go to the regions for global events? And how will you comment on getting into the sphere of hospitality with your rules of competition? That is a very difficult question. And do you know what I would like to say? Naturally, events are important, and we need to thank our government that it invests trillions into events. But we need to think about it, first of all, in terms of feedback. If it is less than 8, then it means nothing. So that is one thing. Another thing, today with digitalization and digital revolution, regrettably, it happened that the word of the mouth is the only thing that works. And the word of the mouth works through megaphone only. And regrettably, it happened that the megaphone creates the understandings and opinions in the minds of people about locations that they had never been before. What do I mean? I mean that people go to Google, TripAdvisor, a Fisher, and so on. So these are the megaphones of the word of the mouth. And they start reading the feedback, whether there is bad and negative feedback. And now the main idea of the marketing is a hygiene of negative feedback. Because if people write that the restaurant is bullshit, then, and if the negative feedback is 7 out of 10, nobody would go there. And if people describe cockroaches running in the room, or how they ate something unhealthy and something bad in a restaurant, and so on and so forth. So the main task of any restaurant, any business, and the government that supports this business is to come up with the feeling of happiness in our clients, or as we call them, guests' hearts. Because we should not think that they visit restaurants to eat and drink something. They can buy something in grocery store and eat it at home. So their main task is to become happy, to feel happiness when they go out. So if we treat it like this, I believe the main task of the government now is training and education in the sphere of hospitality. And now it is at a very low level because the people that we receive now to work for us have very low level of knowledge that is really very primitive, and they do not understand that we need to invoke this happiness and not just to sell sausages. And another thing that I want to mention is that, yes, events create the flows, and the infrastructure put together by entrepreneurs can maintain these flows. But if you go to a restaurant and a hotel where you cannot eat or sleep, the impact of events will be zero. I will not say anything about stadia because I do not understand anything there, but I understand that if a lot of funds are invested, but afterwards there is no tourist product, like, for example, as for Sochi, if you eliminate slopes or sea from it, no one will go there. Or like Suzdal, for example, there is a product, and then a lot of funds are invested into factories and so on and so forth. So the infrastructure is not only restaurants and hotels, but activities that actually result into tourist flows. And it was not myself mentioning education and training, but I can say that people come to receive huge salaries but without any knowledge, and it feels like I educate them constantly. So do I understand it correctly that there is a certain issue with the staff personnel and their qualification? Well, in the restaurant industry, there is no staff, no good staff at all. Colleagues, well, no good staff. But there are a lot of people. Boris gave a great definition. So if the main motivation is to eat and to enjoy, then it is gastronomic tourism. And if that is to ski or to swim, that can be something to add to gastronomic tourism. Because if you get rid of gastronomic tourism, anyway, they will go to ski and swim. We have one more presentation of Andrei Slejko. You have 4 minutes. Colleagues, while Andrei is speaking now, I have a request to all of you. You will have 30 seconds to voice 2 recommendations to the hospitality sphere for the future 5 years of its development. So you as experts, what do you think the industry of hospitality should do to shape its own trends or to embark on the trends that our country is trying to compete in? Andrei, you're welcome. Good evening. I will be really very fast. Boris mentioned the word of the mouth, and I would like to use it to share with you some applied advice that you can put to practice after you leave this room.
Therefore, it's always going to be very problematic in terms of the resources. You always will lack money for promotion. You always lack money for good content, to give good remuneration to copywriters and journalists. So the solution to the creative tasks through its occurrence. So the task is for the tourist to be motivated for the trip. So what are the trends? Every sworn in the mass media, every guest is very active at sharing good experience and sharing bad experience, but this is the source of information further on. All the guests are digitalized as of today. This is the basic demand with the mass flow pyramid is at lower level. There is all types of search engine in the digital environment, and the trend over the 2 years, this is the oral message. If we're digitalized, if the Alice and Siri are going to see us as well. What is the way out of this situation? So how can we make use of all of this? We call this strategy O2O, online to offline strategy. The person on the sofa is motivated through the gadget. He has to get up and to get to our facility, to try the meal, to check in the hotel. And whenever it is done, we encourage the person to share the feedback in personal account to become this word of mouth information channel. I believe that many of you have visited Perm, the salty ears. So who knows what was the purpose of that? When a person puts his face into this frame, and this is the most interesting point for the taking photos, the person looks like a person with a big salty ears, and through the stopper you can see the name of the hotel, and we motivate and encourage people to promote our hotel, this hospitality facility. A very brief case talking about the Perm. In May, we launched a user content which is called Perm Period 2.0. In June, we saw the business content. In July, it was in Chinese. In August, 400 units, where there is a special task to describe the routes for the children from the 8th grade. Thus, what is the conclusion? Another factor in terms of monitoring. A golden ring, as an example, we monitored the mentioning of golden ring within October, 50,000 of messages, more than 100 million of contacts. That's about good news and expected news, 1% of negative and positive feedback, so 90% is neutral or advertising. Most authors are 55 plus, when the norm is from 25 to 35. This is the case I would like to describe. This means that if we encourage these age group, so the linear is going up there. And the last slide, which we have discussed, the strategy 2.0. So encourage everyone and provide very positive content. Andrei has touched upon a very interesting point, as the figures in the hospitality. This is a trend which is voiced in many platforms. From Igor Olegovich is going to conclude the session. So Vadim, just 20 seconds. 2 key recommendations which would enable us to be very competitive in the global system of the hospitality sector. As we've been talking much about the service level, for it to develop and exist, we need to learn at different levels. The staff, the managers, and the operators, and the owners of the business. For the owners and managers, separate recommendation, try to learn to calculate. For God's sake. So, Mriya, I wouldn't reiterate. I would like to add that since the new challenges are in the years to come, I do believe that the main trend is to integrate fully into gaining momentum tourism sector to become an integral part of this area, and the hospitality area should be very important, and 10% of GDP, which should be provided by the tourism growth, should be the driver. We should provide for the hospitality area. Vyacheslav, for the ministers of the regions and the heads of the departments, what is your recommendation? And maybe for the business itself. not to reiterate, yeah, we need to add. We should aim at business, not to give any obstacles, but to provide for the opportunities in terms of infrastructure and resources. So, Boris, the recommendation for the owners of the business who participate in the projects, who are trying to do their best to create this project, some of them are cautious, some of them have other obstacles. What are the recommendations to the businessmen and entrepreneurs? First of all, we need to understand that the goal of the business is not the money in the hospitality industry. When you regard business as the main source of money, you're moving into the contradiction against what the client opts for. The main goal is the happiness of our client. When you implement this concept, the result of this goal is the money. What is the problem that we face? To be honest, restaurant business is a very sophisticated one. The profit margin is very low. Over the recent time, and I'm very happy about that, in Moscow it has happened. The state started to assist. We needed to have some threshold. We had some monitoring and checks. Before, months prior to the Olympic Games, I had a check. Everything was checked during the whole day. And they found something to look at. I didn't have an agreement or the contract with the copyright organization since I have music from the speakers. They just dismantled all the speakers. And 10 people dismantled all the speakers in my restaurant. Dmitry had a very great example with the scrambled eggs. And now you have a different example. It was long ago. Luckily, this time is over. Now we have some great assistance from the state. Vladimir, so please, be brief, 15 seconds for 2 recommendations. The first recommendation, if you feel power to create, do it. If you do not feel power to create, find the people who are ready to create and promote this creation. François Rabelais has mentioned a very interesting phrase. Have a good meal, drink good wine, and you will never die. Igor, can you summarize all the recommendations? Learn to calculate. We've been talking, for the God's sake, a long time. This is a problem. This is a issue. As of today, the business has changed. And like in the 90s, you go to a person, you see the full banquet hall. Can I do it? I'm going to find a chef and manager, and it's going to go up like that. It's not going to work anymore. Everyone who is moving into this business and asks me for advice, and I ask them, do you understand something in this industry, or do you have a concept? I'm an investor. If you don't have a partner, please do not even touch this business. You will go bust in 4 months. And the major thing, what is being discussed, what has been elaborated on for many years, I have never thought that I would be dealing with education. Unfortunately, we don't have a good training educational sector. The business believes that there are some educational facilities and they should prepare some stuff. They cannot do that, unfortunately. As Stalin said, we don't have other teachers for you. We have the problem. So people from business not going into the education as in are going to make the same money, and they are not going to share their own expertise. The people who are here are komsomolets in their soul, as they want to share something. I was shared 40 years ago. The problem in the restaurant with staff existed. The problem was the same. The problem hasn't changed over these 40 years, and this is a big problem. And everybody thinks that the major thing which is being discussed by Boris, this is the quality of food, the quality of service. So the managers We have only managers in place, but we don't have regular staff. The managers are not ready to put their hand into this activity. The education exists in its own world, business exists in its different world. We don't have a correlation. We need to work with the Ministry of Agriculture for us to have high-level products. We need to work with the educational sector. We need to work with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. I'm discussing the rough containers to urge them to transport fish from the Far East to the central Russia. It's easier for them to sell this fish in Korea and Japan. We're doing these things. So I urge you to get together, to move in the same direction. But you need to understand clearly, and we'd like to be crystal clear. We're talking about the man's influence on the tourist traffic. Do we calculate that? One day the Muscovites are going to hate all these people coming. Or it's going to be like in Venice, when the hotel is crazy. There is no meal, but the traffic is in place because it's a very interesting place to watch. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you, dear experts, dear speakers. Thank you for this very fruitful. So we're out of time. Dear colleagues, thank you very much.